I never thought the hands that once clung to mine at bedtime would be the ones to sign away my dignity. I never imagined the grandson I raised would watch his wife strip me of everything I had worked 68 years to build, and that he would let her. But what they didn't know was that life had kept one secret from me too, a secret that would change everything the moment I discovered it. And when I did, the ground beneath their feet began to shift. Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a reckoning 40 years in the making. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe, because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed family meant safety. I believed blood was thicker than greed. I believed wrong. I spent 37 years teaching 7th grade English in inner-city Philadelphia. Every essay I graded, every parent conference I attended, every dollar I saved from my modest teacher's salary went toward building a life of dignity. When my husband Thomas passed from a sudden heart attack 3 years ago, the world went silent in a way I'd never experienced. But I told myself I still had Marcus, my grandson, the boy I'd raised from age 7 when my daughter couldn't. The boy who used to fall asleep with his head on my lap while I read to him. The boy who promised he'd always take care of me. Last year, I retired. The school threw me a small party, handed me a plaque, and sent me home with 37 years of memories and a pension that would keep me comfortable, but not extravagant. My house in West Philadelphia, the row home Thomas and I had bought in 1983, had become too much. The stairs hurt my knees. The memories hurt my heart. Every corner whispered his name. When Marcus and his wife Jasmine offered me a place to stay, it felt like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known I was praying. Marcus had done well for himself, or so it seemed. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a nice car, lived in a modern apartment complex in Center City. Jasmine managed a high-end boutique in Rittenhouse Square. They seemed stable, successful, the kind of couple that made you believe you'd done something right in raising them. I moved in on a Tuesday in September. The leaves were just starting to turn, and I remember thinking this was a new chapter, a chance to be close to family again, to not eat dinner alone every night in front of the television. I tried to make myself useful. I cooked, though Jasmine rarely ate what I made, said she was watching her carbs or doing some cleanse I'd never heard of. I cleaned, though she'd often redo whatever I'd done, wiping down counters I'd just wiped, reorganizing cabinets I'd just organized. I offered to run errands, to help with anything they needed. I tried to stay small, to not be a burden. But Jasmine had a way of making me feel like I was taking up too much space just by breathing the same air. It started with small things. She'd sigh heavily when I asked a question. She'd talk over me at dinner, as if I hadn't spoken at all. Once, I heard her on the phone with a friend, her voice carrying through the thin walls. "She's driving me insane," she said. "I can't even walk around in my own home without tripping over her, like I'm running a nursing home or something." The words cut deeper than any knife could. I wanted to confront her, but Marcus always found a way to smooth things over. "She's stressed, Grandma," he'd say. "Work's been crazy. Just give her some space." So I gave her space. I stayed in my room more. I ate my meals quickly and quietly. I made myself invisible, the way you do when you're trying to survive in a place that doesn't want you. That's what it felt like. Survival. Not living, surviving. Then came the paperwork. It was a Thursday evening, unseasonably warm for October. Marcus came home early, which was unusual. He had a folder in his hand, the kind with a legal firm's name printed on the tab. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and Jasmine appeared beside him, arms crossed, that tight smile on her face that never quite reached her eyes. "Grandma, we need to talk about your finances," Marcus said. His voice was gentle, but there was something rehearsed about it, like he'd practiced this conversation in the mirror. I blinked at him, confused. "My finances? I'm fine, sweetheart. I have my pension and my savings." Marcus and Jasmine exchanged a look. "That's the thing," Jasmine said, leaning forward. "We've been thinking. You're getting older. What if something happens? What if you need care? Long-term care is expensive, Eleanor. Very expensive." The way she said my name, formal and cold, made my stomach tighten. Marcus slid the folder toward me. "We spoke to a financial advisor," he said. "The best way to protect your assets is to put them in a trust. That way, if you ever need Medicaid or assisted living, the government can't take everything you've worked for. I stared at the papers, trying to focus, but the words blurred together. I wasn't good with legal documents, never had been. Thomas used to handle all of that. But this is your inheritance, I said slowly. I was planning to leave it to you anyway when I'm gone. Exactly, Jasmine said quickly. Too quickly. But if we wait until then, taxes will eat up half of it. This way it's protected. You're protected. We're just trying to help you, Grandma. She touched my hand, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe that the coldness I'd been feeling was all in my head, that they loved me, that they wanted what was best for me. Sign here, Marcus said, pointing to a line at the bottom of the page. And here, and here. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. Something in my gut screamed at me to stop, to read every word, to call a lawyer, to wait. But I looked at Marcus, at his familiar face, at the grandson I'd tucked into bed 1,000 times, and I thought he would never hurt me. So I signed. 3 weeks later, I found out what I'd really done. I went to the bank to withdraw money for groceries. The cashier, a young woman I'd known for years, looked at her screen and frowned. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," she said. "This account has been closed." My heart stopped. Closed? There must be a mistake. She turned the screen toward me. According to our records, the account was transferred and closed on October 15th. I stumbled out of that bank, my chest so tight I thought I was having a heart attack. When I got back to the apartment, Marcus was at work, but Jasmine was home, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "My bank account is closed," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Jasmine didn't even look up. "Yeah, we moved everything into the trust, remember? For your protection." "Where's the trust?" I asked. "Show me the paperwork." Now she looked at me, and the smile was gone. "It's with our financial advisor. Don't worry about it, Eleanor. Everything's taken care of. But I need money," I said, louder now. "I need to buy groceries, personal items. I need access to my own money." Jasmine stood up, and for the first time I saw it clearly. The contempt, the calculation. "You signed everything over," she said slowly, like she was talking to a child. "You don't have your own money anymore. We manage it for you now. If you need something, ask Marcus. He'll give you an allowance." An allowance. The word hit me like a slap. I had worked my entire life. I had raised this boy. And now I needed permission to spend the money I had earned? "I thought this was to protect me," I whispered. Jasmine picked up her phone again, dismissing me. "It is protecting you," she said, "from yourself." That night, I lay awake in the small guest room that had become my prison. The walls felt like they were closing in. I tried calling Marcus, but he didn't answer. I tried again the next morning. He finally called back that evening, his voice tight and impatient. "Grandma," Jasmine explained everything. "This is what's best. You're not thinking clearly. You're getting older. We're doing this because we love you. But I didn't sign up to lose control of my life," I said, my voice cracking. "You'll thank us later," he said, and then he hung up. The following weeks were a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I asked for money, there was a delay, an excuse, a lecture about budgeting. Jasmine watched me like a warden. She commented on everything I ate, everything I bought, every minute I spent outside the apartment. "Where are you going? When will you be back? Did Marcus approve that purchase?" I felt myself disappearing, becoming smaller and smaller until I was barely a shadow in my own life. Then came the night that shattered whatever hope I had left. It was late November, the week before Thanksgiving. I had asked Marcus for money to buy ingredients for Thanksgiving dinner, told him I wanted to cook for the family like I used to. He said he'd think about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up to get water and heard voices coming from their bedroom. The door was cracked open, and I stopped, frozen in the hallway. "How much longer do we have to keep her here?" Jasmine's voice, sharp and irritated. Marcus sighed. "I don't know, until we figure out what to do with the house." "The house? My house? The one I'd sold?" "We should have gotten more out of her," Jasmine continued. "The pension isn't enough. What about her life insurance? Does she even have any?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, 100,000. Named me as the beneficiary years ago." "Well," Jasmine said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Let's hope she doesn't live too long then, financially speaking." They both laughed. They laughed. I stood there in the dark hallway, my hand pressed against my mouth to keep from screaming, and something inside me broke. Not my heart. I'd expected cruelty. What broke was my illusion, the fantasy that love could survive greed, that blood meant loyalty, that I mattered to them at all. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. And that's when I saw it, tucked in the corner of my old jewelry box I'd brought from home. An envelope, yellowed and forgotten, with my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, dated 15 years ago, from a law firm I'd never heard of. "Dear Mrs. Eleanor Vance," it began, "we are writing to inform you that you have been named as a beneficiary in the estate of Cameron Deshawn Mitchell." My breath caught. Cameron Mitchell. I remembered him immediately, a student from my early teaching years, 1997. A brilliant boy, troubled home life, anger issues that got him suspended more than once. But he loved to read. I used to lend him books, let him eat lunch in my classroom when the cafeteria was too much. I wrote him letters of recommendation, helped him apply to colleges, believed in him when no one else did. I'd lost track of him after he graduated. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to California, something about computers and technology. The letter continued. "Mr. Mitchell passed away in June of this year. In his will, he left specific instructions that you be contacted and informed of your inheritance. He credited you with saving his life and wanted to ensure you were taken care of. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of your bequest." The letter was 15 years old. I'd never seen it, never opened it. It must have arrived while Thomas was sick, and in the chaos of his illness and death, it had gotten buried, forgotten, tucked away in a box I rarely opened. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold the paper. The next morning I called the law firm. It took hours, being transferred from person to person, explaining who I was, why I was calling about a decade-old estate. Finally, a senior partner named David Brennan came on the line. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice warm with recognition. "We've been trying to reach you for years. I thought you'd declined the inheritance." "Declined? I never received the letter until yesterday," I said. There was a long pause. Then, "That's unfortunate," he said. "But the good news is, the estate has been held in trust, waiting for you. Cameron was very specific. He wanted you to have it, no matter how long it took." "What exactly did he leave me?" I asked, barely breathing. Brennan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vance, Cameron Mitchell was one of the early employees at a tech startup that became very successful. When he passed, his stock options and investments were worth approximately $37 million. He left you $5 million. The world tilted. I thought I'd misheard. $5 million? Yes, ma'am. Plus accumulated interest over the years. Currently, the trust holds approximately $6.2 million in your name. I sat down hard on the bed, the phone pressed so tight to my ear it hurt. "This is real? This isn't a scam?" "I can send you all the documentation today," he said. "We'll need to verify your identity, of course, but assuming everything checks out, the funds can be transferred within 2 weeks. When I hung up the phone, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't laugh. I just sat there in that small guest room, in the apartment where I'd been made to feel worthless, and smiled. A slow, quiet smile that spread across my face like sunrise. They thought they'd taken everything from me. They thought I was powerless. They thought I had nowhere to go. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out. I didn't tell anyone. Not Marcus, not Jasmine, not a single soul. For the first time in 6 months, I had a secret, and it felt like armor. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed carefully in one of my nicer outfits, and told Jasmine I was going to the library. She barely looked up from her phone. "Whatever," she said. "Be back by 6. We're ordering in, and I don't want to deal with you interrupting." I took the bus downtown to the law offices of Brennan and Associates. The building was steel and glass, the kind of place that made you feel small just walking through the doors. But I held my head high. I had an appointment. I had 6.2 million reasons to walk through those doors like I belonged there. David Brennan was exactly what I'd imagined. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who made you feel protected just by being in the room. He stood when I entered, came around his desk, and shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Vance," he said warmly, "I'm so glad you finally received our letter. Please, sit down." He walked me through everything. The documentation, the verification process, the transfer timeline. He showed me statements, investment reports, letters that Cameron had written to the firm explaining exactly why he wanted me to have this money. In one letter, dated just months before his death, Cameron had written words that made my eyes blur with tears. Mrs. Vance taught me that I was worth saving. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Every success I've had, every opportunity, every moment of peace in my life traces back to her classroom, to her belief in me. I want her final years to be filled with the same security and dignity she gave me when I had nothing. I pressed my hand to my mouth, overwhelmed. "He remembered me," I whispered. "He never forgot," Brennan said gently. "And he wanted to make sure you never had to worry about money again." We spent 3 hours going through everything. Brennan recommended financial advisors, attorneys who specialized in elder law, accountants who could help me understand the tax implications. He also asked pointed questions about my current living situation, questions that made it clear he suspected something wasn't right. When I told him about the trust, about signing over my assets, his expression darkened. "Mrs. Vance," he said carefully, "what you're describing sounds like financial exploitation. It's more common than you'd think, especially when elderly individuals are pressured by family members. I need you to bring me every document you signed, everything." I nodded, but inside, something hard and cold was crystallizing. This wasn't just about getting my money back. This was about making them understand exactly what they'd done, that they'd preyed on someone they thought was powerless, that they'd gambled on my silence and lost. I left the office with a folder full of documents, a new bank account at a different institution, and instructions to say nothing until the inheritance cleared and we had a full legal strategy in place. The transfer would take 10 days, 10 days of pretending, 10 days of playing the role of the helpless old woman they thought I was. I could do that. I'd been doing it for 6 months. Over the next week and a half, I watched them, really watched them. I paid attention to their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. Marcus left early every morning and came home late, avoiding me, avoiding conflict, avoiding guilt. Jasmine spent her days shopping, lunching with friends, spending money like it grew on trees. Our money, I realized, the money they'd taken from me. I started going through papers when they weren't home. I found the trust documents buried in a file cabinet in their bedroom. As I read through them, my blood ran cold. This wasn't a protective trust. This was a revocable transfer, and Marcus had given himself and Jasmine complete control as trustees. They could spend it however they wanted. There were no protections for me, no guarantees, no oversight. It was a blank check, and I'd signed it because I'd trusted them. I photographed every page with a cheap phone I'd bought with the last bit of cash I had hidden in my purse. Then I kept digging. I found credit card statements, bills marked past due, a notice from Marcus's employer about unpaid advances. They were drowning in debt. The nice apartment, the expensive clothes, the lavish dinners, it was all a facade. They'd been living beyond their means for years, and when I moved in, they saw a lifeline. My pension, my savings, my social security checks. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I found emails between Jasmine and Marcus, dated back before I'd even retired. "If we can get her to move in," Jasmine had written, "we can convince her to consolidate. She trusts you. She won't question it." Marcus's response made my stomach turn. "I know. Give me time. I'll handle it." I sat on their bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, and something inside me turned to steel. These weren't my family. They were predators, and I had been prey, but not anymore. On the 10th day, David Brennan called. "Mrs. Vance, the funds have cleared. You now have full access to your inheritance. I want you to come to the office tomorrow. We need to discuss next steps." That night at dinner, I sat quietly while Marcus and Jasmine talked about their plans for the holidays. "We're thinking about Aruba," Jasmine said, scrolling through her phone. 2 weeks in December. We deserve it after the year we've had." "Who's we?" I asked softly. She looked up, annoyed. "Us? Obviously." "What about me?" I asked. She laughed, actually laughed. "Eleanor, you can't travel. You're too old. You'd just slow us down. Besides, someone needs to watch the apartment." Marcus said nothing. He just kept eating, eyes on his plate, the coward he'd always been. The next morning, I left the apartment with 2 suitcases, the same 2 I'd arrived with. Jasmine was still asleep. Marcus had already left for work. I took one last look at that place, at the prison they'd built around me, and I walked out. I checked into a hotel downtown. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet and mine. Then I went to meet with David Brennan and the team he'd assembled. The elder law attorney, Patricia Morrison, was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the trust documents I'd photographed and shook her head. "This is textbook exploitation," she said. "They used undue influence to get you to sign over your assets. We can challenge this, but it's going to take time." "How much time?" I asked. "Months, possibly. Court filings, depositions, proving they coerced you." I sat back in my chair, thinking. Then I asked a question that changed everything. What if I don't want to challenge it? What if I just let them think they won? The room went quiet. Patricia leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" I smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "I'm thinking they took my money because they thought I needed them. They thought I had nowhere to go. I want them to feel what it's like when everything you depend on disappears." Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired a private investigator named James Crawford, a former detective who specialized in financial fraud. I gave him everything I'd found, and I asked him to dig deeper. What he uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. Marcus had been embezzling from his company, small amounts at first, then larger. He was under investigation, though he didn't know it yet. Jasmine had 3 credit cards maxed out in my name, cards she'd opened using my information after I'd signed those documents. They'd taken out a second mortgage on my old house before selling it, pocketing the difference. They'd stolen over $150,000 from me, and they'd done it systematically, carefully, criminally. James looked at me across his desk. "Mrs. Vance, with this evidence, I can have them arrested." I thought about that, about Marcus in handcuffs, about Jasmine's face when the police came. Part of me wanted it, but another part, the part that had spent 40 years teaching children about consequences and choices, wanted something else. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to understand what they've lost first." James raised an eyebrow. "You're playing a dangerous game. They're already criminals. What's to stop them from getting worse?" I met his eyes, "Because I'm going to give them exactly what they wanted. Access to money. And then I'm going to watch them destroy themselves." Here's what I did. Through Patricia, I had legal notices sent to Marcus and Jasmine informing them that the trust was being audited by the state due to irregular activity. It was vague enough to be terrifying, specific enough to be believable. The funds would be frozen pending investigation. It wasn't true, but they didn't know that. I also rented an apartment in the same building where I'd discovered they'd applied to move, a luxury high-rise in Rittenhouse Square. They'd been denied because of their credit, but I'd paid a year's rent up front, 2 floors above the unit they'd wanted. Then I waited. Marcus called me 3 days after the notices went out. His voice was panicked. "Grandma, where are you? We've been worried sick." I stayed silent. "There's been a mistake," he continued, talking fast. "Some kind of audit on the trust. They're saying there are irregularities. We need you to come in and straighten this out." "Why would I do that, Marcus?" I asked quietly. "Because," he stammered, "because it's your money. We were just trying to protect it." "You were trying to steal it," I said. The line went dead quiet. "Grandma," he started, but I cut him off. "I know everything, Marcus. The credit cards, the embezzlement, the emails between you and Jasmine planning this months before I moved in. I know what you are." He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. Instead, his voice turned cold, unfamiliar. "Where are you? Tell me where you are right now." "No," I said, and then I hung up. That night, Jasmine started calling, 23 times, each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Eleanor, please, we can explain. It's not what you think. We love you. We were just trying to help." The final voicemail was different. Her voice was low, threatening. "You're making a big mistake. You don't know what Marcus is capable of when he's cornered. You need to come back and fix this, or you're going to regret it." I saved that voicemail and sent it to James Crawford. "This is a threat," he said. "We need to file a restraining order." "Not yet," I said. "Let them spiral." "But Mrs. Vance, Eleanor," he said, using my first name for the first time. "These people are dangerous. They're desperate. Desperation makes people do terrible things." "I know," I said, thinking of all the years I'd spent in Philadelphia schools, breaking up fights, talking down angry teenagers, seeing what fear and desperation could do. "But I also know that sunlight is the best disinfectant. I want them exposed, not just arrested. I want everyone to see what they are. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you would have died for, let me know in the comments. Because what came next, what they did next, was something I never could have predicted. And it almost destroyed everything. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard the knock on my hotel room door. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus standing there, alone. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. I should have called security. I should have walked away. But some part of me, the part that had raised him, that had loved him, needed to see if there was anything left of the boy I'd known. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. Marcus looked at me through the gap, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Regret. Grandma, he said, his voice breaking. Please, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. You stole from me. You manipulated me. You laughed about my death. He flinched. You heard that. I heard everything, I said. Marcus pressed his hand against the doorframe, and I noticed his hand was shaking. She's gone, he said. What? Jasmine. She left this morning, took everything of value from the apartment and disappeared. I think she's been planning it for weeks. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow. So you're here because she left you, I said. Not because you're actually sorry. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I'm here because I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how I became this person, and I don't know how to fix it. That's the thing, Marcus, I said softly. You can't. Some things, once broken, stay broken. He nodded slowly, then pulled something from his pocket, an envelope. Inside this is every password, every account number, every document you need to get your money back. Everything Jasmine and I took. I've also written a full confession. You can use it however you want. Why? I asked. Because you deserved better, he whispered, and because I need to face what I've done. He set the envelope on the ground, stepped back, and looked at me one last time. I love you, Grandma. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but it's true. I always loved you. Then he turned and walked away. I stood there for a long time, staring at that envelope, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, everything that could never be undone. When I finally picked it up and opened it, I found exactly what he'd promised. Account statements showing where every dollar had gone, passwords to email accounts, a 3-page confession signed and dated, and at the bottom, a note in his handwriting. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that the boy you raised is still in here somewhere, buried under all the mistakes and the greed and the fear. He's ashamed, and he's sorry. I sat on the hotel bed, holding those papers, and cried for the first time since this nightmare began. Not for myself, but for the little boy who used to read books under the covers with a flashlight, for the teenager who'd promised to make me proud, for the man who'd lost himself so completely he didn't know how to find his way back. The next morning, I met with Patricia and David. I showed them Marcus's confession. This is everything we need, Patricia said, scanning the documents. We can file criminal charges. We can recover your assets. We can make sure they never do this to anyone else. I know, I said, but I need you to do something else first. I need you to find Jasmine. They looked at each other. Mrs. Vance, David said carefully. Jasmine is probably long gone. People like her, they know how to disappear. Not if she thinks there's more money to take, I said, and I know exactly how to make her believe there is. That's when I told them my plan. And when I finished, Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd met her. You know, she said, you would have made an excellent lawyer. Over the next 3 days, we laid the trap. James Crawford, my investigator, created a fake investment account in my name, showing a balance of $12 million from the full Cameron Mitchell estate. He made sure the login credentials were easy to find, buried in Marcus's email account that Jasmine still had access to. We knew she was monitoring it. We knew she couldn't resist. Sure enough, on the 4th day, James got an alert. Someone had accessed the fake account from an IP address in Atlantic City. She took the bait, he said, pulling up tracking data. She's at the Borgata, room 217. I looked at Patricia. How fast can we move? She made 2 phone calls, one to the Philadelphia Police Department, one to the New Jersey State Police. Fast enough, she said. We drove to Atlantic City that evening. James, Patricia, David, and me. The police were already in position when we arrived. They'd been watching her room for 2 hours, waiting for the right moment. I asked if I could be there when they arrested her. The detective in charge, a woman named Sarah Chen, hesitated. "That's unusual," she said. "I know," I replied, "but I need to see her face. I need her to know I won." Detective Chen studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay behind us. Don't say anything. Just watch." We took the elevator to the second floor. The hallway was quiet, elegant, the kind of place Jasmine had always wanted to be, the kind of place my money had probably paid for more than once. Detective Chen knocked on the door. Housekeeping. There was movement inside, then the door opened. Jasmine stood there in a silk robe, champagne glass in hand, and the look on her face when she saw me was something I will remember for the rest of my life. Shock, then rage, then fear, all in the span of a heartbeat. "Hello, Jasmine," I said quietly. "Jasmine Harmon," Detective Chen said, stepping forward. "You're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Jasmine's eyes never left mine as they cuffed her. "You set me up," she hissed. "No," I said. "You set yourself up. I just made sure you finished what you started." As they led her away, she shouted back at me. "You're nothing! You hear me? You're a pathetic old woman with nothing!" I watched her disappear down the hallway, still screaming, and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just the exhaustion of a war finally ending. But it wasn't over. Not yet, because when I got back to my hotel room that night, there was a message waiting, from Marcus, and what it said made my blood run cold. "Grandma, I'm so sorry for everything. I can't live with what I've become. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Tell the boy I used to be that I'm sorry too. Please forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. I love you, always did." I called him immediately. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I called the police, gave them his address, begged them to do a wellness check. They said they'd send someone right away. But as I sat there in that hotel room, phone pressed to my chest, heart hammering against my ribs, I realized the terrible truth. In destroying them, I might have destroyed the one person I'd actually wanted to save. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the phone, waiting, praying, bargaining with a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Please," I whispered into the darkness, "please don't let me lose him like this. Not like this." The call came at 3:47 in the morning. "Mrs. Vance?" A woman's voice, professional but gentle. "This is Officer Martinez with the Philadelphia Police Department. We responded to your wellness check request." My heart stopped. "Is he alive?" There was a pause that lasted a lifetime. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Harmon is alive. We found him in his apartment. He had taken pills, but a neighbor heard something fall and called building security. The paramedics got there in time. He's at Jefferson Hospital now, stable but under psychiatric observation." I collapsed back against the hotel bed, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I breathed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I was at the hospital before sunrise. They wouldn't let me see him at first. Immediate family only. But I stood in that waiting room until a doctor finally came out. A young woman with kind eyes and exhausted shoulders. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" she asked. I nodded. "He's been asking for you." They led me through sterile white hallways that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Marcus was in a private room, hooked up to monitors, an IV in his arm. He looked small in that hospital bed, smaller than I'd ever seen him. When he saw me, fresh tears spilled down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Grandma." I pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand. The hand I used to hold when we crossed streets. The hand that used to grip mine during thunderstorms. "Hush now," I said softly. "You're alive. That's what matters." "I wanted to end it," he said, his voice hollow. "I couldn't face what I'd done. Couldn't face you. Couldn't face myself. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face that night, when Jasmine said those things, when I just sat there and let it happen." I squeezed his hand. "Marcus, I need you to listen to me. What you did was terrible, unforgivable maybe, but you're still here. You're still breathing, and that means you still have a choice about who you become next. But I destroyed everything," he said. "I destroyed us. Some things can be rebuilt," I said. "Not the same way, not the same shape, but rebuilt." He looked at me with those eyes that had once been so full of wonder, reading books in my classroom while the other kids played outside. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. Right now, I'm just grateful you're alive. Forgiveness, if it comes, will take time. Maybe years, maybe forever. But I haven't given up on you, Marcus. Even after everything, I haven't given up. He closed his eyes, more tears leaking out. I don't deserve that. No, I said. You don't. But that's the thing about family, real family. It's not about what you deserve. It's about what you need. And right now, you need help. Professional help, the kind I can't give you. He stayed in that hospital for 2 weeks. Psychiatric evaluation, therapy, medication adjustments. I visited him every day, but I didn't make promises I couldn't keep. I didn't say everything was fine or that we'd go back to how things were, because we wouldn't. We couldn't. But I showed up. Every single day I showed up. Meanwhile, Jasmine's arrest made the news. Not national news, but local. Enough that people started reaching out to me, other elderly people she'd befriended, other families she'd infiltrated. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Torres, told me Jasmine had been running variations of this scam for years. She targets vulnerable older adults, Diana explained, usually through their grandchildren or children. She isolates them, gains their trust, then systematically drains their resources. You're actually lucky, Mrs. Vance. Most of her victims never recover anything. How many? I asked. How many people did she hurt? At least 7 that we know of, Diana said. Maybe more. Your case, your evidence, it's going to put her away for a long time. Good, I said, because no one should ever feel the way she made me feel. Worthless, invisible, like my entire life meant nothing. The trial was set for 6 months later. Marcus agreed to testify against Jasmine as part of a plea deal for his own crimes. He'd served 2 years probation, pay restitution, and complete mandatory therapy. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was accountability, and that was something. During those months, I started rebuilding my life, not the old life, the one before Thomas died, before everything fell apart, a new life. I moved into a beautiful apartment in West Philadelphia, not far from where I used to teach. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that let in so much light it felt like hope. I furnished it slowly, carefully, with things that made me happy. A reading chair by the window, bookshelves that I filled with all the novels I'd never had time to read, plants, so many plants, because I wanted to watch things grow. I reconnected with old friends from the school, teachers I'd lost touch with during Thomas's illness and after. We met for coffee, for dinners, for long walks through the park. They reminded me who I'd been before grief and betrayal had tried to erase me. I also started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helped elderly victims of financial abuse. I shared my story, helped others recognize the warning signs, held their hands when they felt ashamed. Because I knew that shame, the weight of it, the way it makes you feel complicit in your own destruction. One woman, her name was Dorothy, she was 72 and her son had stolen her entire retirement. When she came into the clinic, she could barely speak without crying. "I'm so stupid," she kept saying. "How could I let this happen?" "You're not stupid," I told her, holding both her hands in mine. "You're human. You love someone who didn't deserve it. That's not stupidity. That's tragedy." She looked at me, really looked at me. "How did you survive it?" she asked. I smiled. By deciding that what they took from me, money, dignity, security, those weren't the most important things I had. The most important thing was my ability to choose what came next. They tried to take that too, but they failed. 6 months after Marcus's hospitalization, the day before Jasmine's trial was set to begin, he came to see me. He called first, asked if he could visit. I almost said no. But something in his voice, humility maybe, or just exhaustion, made me say yes. He looked different when he arrived, thinner, older, but also somehow lighter, like he'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. We sat on my couch, tea between us, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. "I've been in therapy 4 times a week," he said, "individual and group. I'm learning about the psychology of financial abuse, about how people rationalize hurting the ones they love." I didn't respond, just listened. "The therapist asked me to trace it back," he continued, "to figure out when I stopped seeing you as my grandmother and started seeing you as a solution to my problems. And I realized it happened so gradually I didn't even notice. First it was just, oh, Grandma has savings, she'll be fine. Then it was, we're family, what's hers is ours. Then it became, she's old anyway, she doesn't need it." He looked down at his hands. By the time I realized what I'd become, I was already so deep in the lie I didn't know how to get out. So instead of getting out, I went deeper. I let Jasmine push me. I let my own fear and greed push me. And I convinced myself you'd never know, never find out, that I could take care of you while taking from you. He looked up, met my eyes. But the worst part, Grandma, the absolute worst part, is that some part of me knew you'd forgive me anyway, because you always did. That's what I was counting on, your love, and I weaponized it. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. I sipped my tea, gathering my thoughts. You're right, I said finally. I would have forgiven you. Before all this, if you'd come to me and said you needed money, I would have given you everything I had. No questions asked. That's who I was, but that's not who I am anymore. He nodded slowly. I know. Do you understand what you took from me? I asked, and my voice was steady, clear. It wasn't just money, Marcus. It was my ability to trust, my sense of safety in the world. You made me afraid of the people I love. That's a wound that doesn't heal. I know, he said, and his voice cracked. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I could undo it. You can't, I said. So the question is, what do you do with that? What do you do with the knowledge that you permanently damaged someone you claim to love? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, you become someone who never does it again. You do the work. You make amends where you can. You accept that some bridges are burned and you don't get to rebuild them. And you live with it. You carry it. Because that's the price. I looked at him, this man who'd once been a boy in my care, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. Not the performative kind. Not the desperate scrambling of someone caught. But the deep, painful understanding of someone who'd finally looked in the mirror and hated what they saw. I can't promise forgiveness, I said, but I can promise I'm glad you're alive. And I can promise I won't give up on the possibility that someday, maybe, we can find a version of family that's honest. That's enough, he said. That's more than enough. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Jasmine's attorney tried everything. Claimed she was manipulated by Marcus, claimed she didn't understand the documents, claimed the elderly victims were confused. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, testimony from 7 different families, all painting the same picture. A predator who'd perfected the art of exploitation. When they read the verdict, guilty on all counts, I felt something release in my chest. Not joy, exactly. More like the exhale after holding your breath for too long. Jasmine was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair and no patience for nonsense, looked directly at Jasmine before pronouncing sentence. You didn't just steal money, the judge said. You stole dignity. You stole security. You stole the peace of mind that people spent their entire lives earning. And you did it with calculation and malice. This sentence reflects not just the crime, but the depravity of it. Jasmine looked back at me one time as they led her away, and in her eyes, I didn't see remorse. I saw rage. She still believed she was the victim, that we were all against her, that she'd done nothing wrong. Some people never learn. Some people never change, and that's not my burden to carry. After the trial, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I used a portion of Cameron Mitchell's gift to establish a foundation, the Cameron Mitchell Emergency Fund for Educators. It provided financial assistance to retired teachers facing unexpected crises, medical bills, housing emergencies, the kind of situations that made them vulnerable to exploitation. At the opening ceremony, small as it was, just a room full of former colleagues and legal aid workers, I gave a speech. If you're still watching, if this story has moved you in any way, please subscribe. Because the ending, the real ending, is one you won't want to miss. I stood at that podium and I said, for too long, I believed that vulnerability was weakness, that needing help meant I'd failed, that asking for support was admitting defeat. But I've learned something these past 2 years. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's humanity. And the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. This fund exists because Cameron Mitchell understood that, because one teacher's kindness changed his entire life, and because I refused to let the cruelty I experienced be the end of my story. It's just the middle, the ending I get to write myself. The room erupted in applause, and in the back, standing quietly against the wall, I saw Marcus. He didn't approach. He didn't try to talk to me. He just nodded once, a small acknowledgement. and slipped out before the ceremony ended. That night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a check made out to the Cameron Mitchell Emergency Fund. It was for $50,000, nearly everything Marcus had left after restitution and legal fees. And a note. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can keep someone else from having to survive what you survived. This is the start, not of your forgiveness, but of my atonement. I held that check for a long time, sitting in my reading chair, the city lights glowing through my window. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had fueled me through the trial, through the revelations, through all of it, it was gone. In its place was something quieter, but stronger. Resolve, purpose, the understanding that I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine, and I was still here, still standing, still capable of joy and hope and trust, even if it looked different now. A year later, I received an email from Cameron Mitchell's sister, a woman named Diane, who'd been managing his estate before it came to me. She'd heard about the foundation, about the trial, about everything. "Mrs. Vance," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that Cameron talked about you all the time. Even at the end, when he was sick, he'd tell stories about your classroom, about how you made him feel seen. He always said you saved his life, but I think, in a way, he saved yours too. Because without his gift, you wouldn't have had the power to fight back, and dozens of other people wouldn't have had the protection you're giving them now. That's the legacy of kindness. It echoes forward in ways we never expect." She was right. Cameron's kindness, given decades ago to a troubled student, had echoed forward into this moment, into this life I'd rebuilt, into all the people the foundation would help. And my kindness to him, the small acts of belief and support, had created a safety net I never knew I'd need. That's the thing about grace. It's never wasted, even when it feels like it is. I'm 70 years old now. 2 years have passed since that night at Marcus and Jasmine's dinner table, since the moment my life fractured in two before and after. I live alone, but I'm not lonely. I have friends, purpose, days filled with meaning. Marcus and I talk occasionally, carefully. He's rebuilding his life too, working a modest job, living simply, continuing therapy. We may never have what we once did, but we have something, and that's more than I thought possible. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I take out my mother's old diary, the one Cameron's letter was tucked into, and I reread her words. She wrote once, near the end, "The hardest thing about being human is that we're all capable of both profound cruelty and profound kindness. The same hands that hurt can heal. The same heart that betrays can also redeem. We get to choose, every single day, which version of ourselves we become." I used to think that was naive. Now I think it's the most important truth I know. Last month, I received a letter from a woman named Patricia, not my attorney, a different Patricia. She was 65, and her daughter and son-in-law had done to her exactly what Marcus and Jasmine had done to me. She'd read about my case in the news, found the foundation, and reached out. "I feel so ashamed," she wrote. "How could I have been so blind?" I invited her to coffee. We sat in a small cafe in Center City, and I told her the same thing I'd learned the hard way. You weren't blind, you were loving, and there's no shame in that. The shame belongs to the people who exploit love, not to the people who give it. She cried. I held her hand, and I told her about the foundation, about the legal aid clinic, about all the resources that existed to help her fight back. "You're not alone," I said, "and you're stronger than you know." As I walked home that evening, the autumn air crisp and clean, I thought about resilience, how it's not about never breaking. It's about what you do with the pieces. Some people stay broken. They let the betrayal define them, hollow them out, turn them bitter. I understand that. I came close to it myself, but I chose differently. I chose to take the shattered pieces of my life and build something new. Not a reconstruction of what I'd lost, but an entirely different structure. Stronger, maybe. More honest, definitely. Built on truth instead of assumption, on boundaries instead of blind trust. I've learned that love without limits isn't love. It's vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Real love has edges. It has standards. It says, I care about you, but I also care about myself. And those two things don't have to be in conflict. That's what I wish I'd known at 66, when I signed those papers with shaking hands, wanting so desperately to believe I was wanted. But maybe I needed to learn it the hard way. Maybe some wisdom only comes through fire. Tonight, I'll sleep in my own bed, in my own home, surrounded by things I chose. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and decide what to do with my day. Maybe I'll volunteer. Maybe I'll have lunch with friends. Maybe I'll just sit by the window and read, the simple pleasure of time that belongs to no one but me. Whatever I choose, it will be mine, my decision, my life. They tried to take that from me. They failed. And in failing, they taught me the most valuable lesson of all. You can survive betrayal. You can rebuild from ashes. You can be 70 years old with a fractured family and a complicated past and still have a beautiful life, still have purpose, still have hope. The story they wanted to tell about me was that I was a burden, an extra mouth to feed, a problem to be managed. But that's not my story. My story is about a woman who lost everything and discovered she was more than what anyone had taken. A woman who learned that dignity isn't given, it's claimed. A woman who chose to turn her pain into protection for others. That's the story I'm living now, and it's the only one that matters. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you know, share it. Comment below and tell me your truth, because we all have stories of survival. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is tell them out loud so others know they're not alone in the dark. I started this story by saying, I never thought I'd be left out in the cold by my own daughter. And that was true. But here's what I didn't say. I never thought I'd find myself in the cold and discover I could build my own fire, that the warmth I needed was already inside me, that I didn't need their approval or their love to matter. I mattered because I decided I did. And that is a power no one can ever take away. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for believing that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to rise. Remember, you're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by what you do next. And if what you do next is survive, then fight, then rebuild, then that's more than enough. That's everything. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 70 years old, and this is not the story of how I was broken. This is the story of how I became unbreakable.